Hello, insiders. Welcome to today's virtual interview. This is our first interview we've done live, so I'm pretty excited about that. I'm Michelle Young, the founder of Untapped, and please welcome Sean Corcoran. He's the curator of prints and photographs at Museum of the City of New York. Hi, Sean.
Hello, thanks for having me. Appreciate that.
So among many things, Corcoran is the curator of the Museum of the City of New York's exhibition, Collecting New York Stories, which features highlights drawn from the hundreds of additions to the museum's permanent collection over the past 3 years. But those images and collections run the gamut from the colonial era to the present. If you had a chance to see that exhibition, which was open before we went on pause in New York, you might have seen some famous photographer names like Bruce Davidson, Martha Cooper, James Vanderzee. And there's also a companion gallery that shows original drawings by New York illustrator Saul Steinberg, along with garments, posters, decorative objects, and other artifacts that speak to the everyday life of New York City. Taken together, these images and objects show the layered identity of New York and its stories. So Corcoran is also curating images submitted to hashtag COVID Stories NYC, continuing a museum tradition of showcasing photographs submitted by the public around landmark events that impact the city's population as a whole. I had one of my photographs in Rising Tides back in 2013, along with other photographers who have seen their work on Untapped, like Nathan Kenziger. So Sean, it's really great to have you here. I'd like to start with the images that you've shared with us from COVID Stories NYC so far, and there's something, I only put a couple in the article yesterday, so we have more to show everyone today. And I felt that really they start to capture this collective experience that we're all literally living in right now. So it's super interesting because oftentimes you go to exhibitions and they show something that may have already happened. But here we're seeing live things that are unfolding. And so this first picture is one of the ones, of course, that really struck me. Can you tell us more about the image and the photographer Mitchell Hartman? Here's a full screen.
Yeah. Well, first, I guess I should just say that this effort is kind of at the core of the museum's mission. Most people think of museums as being a place to look at the past, but actually in our mission statement, it says the past, present, and considering the future of the city. So, and the other exhibitions you mentioned, and this effort in particular, it's something that we do. It's something, for us, it's important to respond to what is happening in the city today. And in this particular case, this hashtag COVID Stories NYC is an effort to try to give people a sense of the shared experience that's happening today, I mean, it's the beauty of social media today is that we all get to share things instantly, and then by simply hashtagging things, it aggregates them so we can I mean, you can go to our website and look, but you could also just look at the hashtag and see what everybody is posting. And in the case of what I'm selecting, I'm trying to pull together a series of pictures that kind of give a range of the experiences that I'm seeing and living myself, and assume other people are also experiencing. In the case of this first picture by Mitchell Hartman, Mitchell is a Queens-based photographer, and I happen to know Mitchell and have kind of looked at his work over the years, and he's spent, I would say, at least the last half a dozen years photographing life in Queens, and he is very much a street photographer, or at least the work that I typically see is very much street photography based, the kind of classic street photography. But in Mitchell's case, he's very much interested in the life that he sees around the streets of Queens in particular. That's what I respond to. He's done several other series on museum visitors, and he did another series on Harlem as well. But for me, I'm as curator of the Museum of the City of New York, I see plenty of pictures of Manhattan, and I'm always saying to him, I want to see more pictures of, I want to see those pictures you're making in Queens to give a sense of what life is like out there for people who um, are spending most of their time in Manhattan, either working or are they living in the other boroughs and not making it out to Queens as often. And this particular picture, I just kind of felt like it feels like normal life. It's the big difference is the mask, right? Is you could see this guy hanging out on in his neighborhood in Queens, probably like this almost any day. There's a certain casualness to his pose, and maybe the attitude he's projecting. Yet at the same time, he's wearing this mask, so you know that there's this something else going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I feel like the black and white nature makes it feel very timeless.
Mm.
And even the signage, it's not Manhattan, therefore kind of still has that flavor of New York. and
Yeah,
and that one indicator is the mask, and I guess possibly his style, his clothing as well might
yeah.
be a giveaway. But the car is, also feels vintage in its own way.
Mm.
Yeah, no, this photo is great. Then this photograph I also really loved, because I think we hear about people hoarding toilet paper. We see people doing it in action, possibly in videos and social media, but I think to see it in New York City, where we have constrained real estate, and seeing how people are forgoing sunlight for their
Well,
toilet paper.
I kind of feel like there's also a certain level of look what I have kind of going on here. It's also a certain form of display, I think, um, that what for better or for worse. I can't say I condone this, but it does certainly say something about the moment, and to some extent you could say a certain amount of panic that I think this is kind of subsided at this point. This was taken pretty early in the early days, and maybe I'm mistaken, but I don't seem to think that there's quite the run on toilet paper that there was
Right.
right at the beginning. So this actually speaks to the ongoing story, and right is like this was something that was a real worry for people, particularly pretty early in this moment we're living through, and I mean, I suppose it's an ongoing worry to a certain extent, but not to the extent that it was.
Right. I
So
think
there's already a history. This has been more than a month at this point. So this is an early-ish moment in this ongoing moment.
it's like time is very relative in what we're living right now.
Yeah, yeah.
And this photographer, Ruben, I know that he's in the other exhibit, of the larger exhibition as well, right?
Yeah, Ruben is a Harlem-based photographer, and he again is a prowler of the city streets. He tends to make this is in some sense this is unusual for him, but he is a street observer. He tends to make more portraits of New Yorkers. He you know he will tends to stop and engage people he meets on the streets that he finds compelling for one reason or another, and takes their portrait, rather than trying to make candid pictures of people as they move through the city. That's more of someone like Mitchell Hartman's MO is, although that's a more the black and white one we just saw is a little more posed than usual for him, but for Ruben it's very much like engagement, um, an engagement with his subject. And as you mentioned, there is a picture which I think maybe we'll see a little later on in the slideshow, that is included in our Telling New York Stories exhibition. Ruben has a picture of a beachgoer and at Orchard Beach, and it's the back head of a gentleman with a tattoo of the Bronx, literally the words Bronx on his head. It's amazing. I mean, an amazing choice decision by this person, but also an amazing photograph. So
Yeah, we'll show that later.
okay.
Great. Okay. Then this one by the same photographer.
Yeah, this is also by Ruben, and I don't know if I mean, actually, if you look around on social media, you'll see that the Apollo has been putting up these messages on an ongoing basis. I think one of the more recent ones was a Tupac Shakur quote, from the song "Keep Your Head Up." So there are these kind of motivational, inspiring quotes that they've been posting, and this one just seems to be what we're all wishing for one another. And visually, it's, I mean, with the neon light of the Apollo up above, and it's just a really visually compelling picture beyond the message itself.
Yeah, if you didn't know what we were going through now, it could almost be photoshopped, that lettering.
Yeah, that's the digital marquees these days.
Yeah. And I was just by the King's Theater yesterday, and also Nighthawk Prospect Park,
Mm-hmm.
and all the marquees around the city are putting out messages, and it's great that they're hopeful, but I have in the back of my mind that not all cultural institutions are going to make it through this, and I don't know, it's just don't really have full words for it, but just like these thoughts run through my head as I'm seeing like kind of uplifting messages around.
Yeah, I mean, cultural institutions, small businesses, even some of the larger ones. I mean, I think there's beyond the virus itself, there's a lot of a difficulty from the individual level, through all the way up, and these kind of words of encouragement for all of us, I think, are pretty meaningful at the moment.
Yeah, and how about for the museum itself? I've seen some of the initiatives coming out from MCNY, but in terms of you guys adapting to this new world.
Yeah, we've been doing a few things to, and of course have plans to roll out other things as well. But we have a very active blog which we're directing more effort towards. In fact, we just published one by a colleague, Mancho, about specifically about this moment we're living in. But we're also trying to do a bit more online relating to the exhibitions that are on the wall, including the census exhibition, which is very relevant, and everyone should make sure they go and fill out their census forms. But also the basketball exhibition. I know that there are a couple podcasts that are being developed for that exhibition. And of course, our education department is working with citywide with educators who are, trying to teach our kids out there, and they're providing support and I think some lesson plans and things like that. So yeah, on several different fronts, we're trying to be effective and useful to our community.
Great. Okay, so this photograph called Behind Closed Doors also struck me because, again, we read about these things, we're hearing about testing, the problems, and then more widespread rollout and everything, but I think to see it actually happening seems to be a rare image. I'm not sure I have seen an image like this even in the press.
Yeah, and I mean, and this tells you, this is again the impact of not just relying on images from traditional news sources, or these are the actual scientists, who made this picture, and they're I'd have to go back and read what's exactly going on, but I think they're doing testing on the either I don't know, so I probably shouldn't say, but I think it's either they're testing, working on tests to identify if people are infected, or early research on how to fight it.
Yeah.
But again, the people who submitted this picture are actually actively involved in fighting this disease. So
Yeah, I
um,
mean, working in the media, I know that like an image like this you wouldn't be able to publish this probably in
right,
the news media. They wouldn't get the permission. So it's really great to see that there is a place where these images can be stored for perpetuity.
yeah.
Um, yeah, that's very exciting. Okay, so this image fraction lesson, I think a lot of parents, including you and I, are experiencing some form of.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it just these two last pictures kind of hopefully, or even these four pictures we've seen so far, hopefully they give you a sense of the range of types of imagery where we're trying to key on our website, as we kind of pull off of the general hashtag, is again to kind of give you a briefer and thoughtful look at the experiences people are going through, and the range of experiences. And yeah, this is like a really quiet picture, but it says so much, right, about the struggles we all have, as a teacher, to try to teach your students their math lesson, and as parents on the other end of the computer screen, trying to get kids to pay attention, and to work with them to continue their learning. Yeah, it's the many different struggles we're facing at
Yeah,
this particular.
and I feel like the things you learn as children, you kind of forget about it because you don't use it. I have a
Right.
friend who's a lawyer and a equity guy, and he just said, "I just can't remember how to multiply in my head anymore." And to me, like this image really like showcased like a creative attempt to remember
Exactly.
how math works.
Yeah.
On a side note, are you getting a lot of pictures that are taken indoors since people
Um,
are indoors?
they are. Yeah, yeah. They're starting to come in, and because a picture like this was very common early on. We were seeing a lot of these pictures, and they will continue, because as people go out and take their walks, the emptiness of the city it's just so unbelievable. It's so compelling that people these pictures will be made, and they will continue to be made. But yeah, now this people are kind of, you know experiencing life in their four walls, and there's less to go out and photograph. That's actually those are the pictures we actually want. There's another one of that I don't think has been published yet, but it's in there in the hashtags out there in the ether, of somebody took their picture down at their feet, and there's a yoga mat, and they're clearly in the middle of doing a yoga session. Like those are the kind of pictures I'm also interested in, is like, how are we, when we're not teaching our kids, when we can find a quiet moment, how are we filling our days? What are we doing to manage the stress of life as we know it right now? How are we dealing with all of these stresses, and what are we doing to fill our day? So that's the kind of thing I am interested in. In this case, there's a photograph by Wananda Daru, who I spoke to, and she said, for the first couple of weeks, she's Dutch. She was riding her bike around the city, and she would, she lived in up in Inwood, and she said she was riding her bike as far as she kind of felt like going in a particular day, and just kind of making pictures. I looked at her. I looked at some of her work, and she's um, she is a professional photographer, and she makes these. She's known for her interiors, these kind of peopleless interiors, so that are very quiet pictures, and to see her taking those pictures outdoors in some of the busiest places in the world um, is pretty compelling. And in this case, it's the Guggenheim, which on a typical day there are you know just like a dozen vendors and literally hundreds of tourists and New Yorkers visiting the museum out and about on this plaza area. So just to see it you know, completely empty is just such an eye opener.
I'm also curious about the tractor.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what's going on there, but I'm kind of curious about that myself. Maybe I'll have to send her an email and ask her.
Yeah,
Um,
who knows? um, and I think this is the last of the COVID pictures, and then we'll move forward. But this to me also represented just like the architectural adaptations I've been seeing all around. I saw a similar one inside an Uber. I wasn't in it, but I drove by it.
yeah.
And my husband and I noted, like, oh yeah, of course they should do that. Like everyone is kind of DIY figuring out how to keep themselves safe, and especially if they're
Yeah, I
essential
mean,
workers.
to me, it makes me think about, we talk about first responders and the doctors and the EMS technicians and the people who are, dealing with it. But there's a whole other level of essential workers that are kind of keeping these businesses open so we can eat and
Get
get
our
those
toilet
things we
paper.
need. Yeah, exactly. Get our toilet paper, and and they're a whole other level of people on the front lines. And how are they dealing with it? And in larger grocery stores, maybe they've installed plexiglass here. In a local bodega, they've managed the best they can, and but are still there for the people of their neighborhood. So that's the kind of thing I thought of when I saw this. And again, I thought it was kind of an important picture for us to consider as we're going through this moment.
Okay, great. So next, I just want to show everyone some of the pictures that are in Collecting New York Stories, and if you want to tell us a bit um, about the collection and what went
Sure.
into it.
Sure. Yeah. This exhibition, as you mentioned, was a selection of pictures that were collected by the museum over the last 3 years. And in the last, so let's say half dozen years or so, in our collecting, we've placed our particular importance on the way New Yorkers live within the urban context. Certainly we still do collect architectural photography, but we've placed much more emphasis on the way people live within the city. So, and of course, we're trying to collect pictures made throughout the 5 boroughs. We're looking particularly for contemporary pictures. Of course, just like always, we collect pictures, dating back to the early days of photography, if they speak really well to what our mission is. But we're really looking for contemporary pictures of the ways people live in the city, and to reflect the diversity of the city, the different lifestyles. Oh, there's the Bronx photograph we were discussing earlier. But again, to be reflexive of what you see in life on the city streets. And of course, we are also interested in the way people live, behind their apartment doors. But that tends to be less available than the way we share the urban space. And so you see everything here from, you know, the pictures of life in the 80s to much more contemporary um, images. So this is, of course, I mean, this is a picture that's, you know, just a few years old, but also already historic, with, you know, the original Five Points being demolished and the new development happening there.
Yeah, that was such
So
an iconic place when you took the 7 train, you know,
yeah, yeah, and you
passing by
come
Five
up
Points.
above ground, and it's right there. Yeah, and that's one of the interesting things I find about photography is and the city is, the, you know, pictures that are just a few months old can have, you know, already have historical markers to them, because the cities is changing so much. And um, so that's and you know, embedded in all of these pictures is, you know, changing style and personality of New Yorkers. So yeah, you kind of get like a lot of points of entry through photography. You know, it's not just what street it was on. It's about the person passing through the street, and what their story is, and how they're dressed, and how different peoples are interacting with one another or not. I mean, that's also, you know, something that's revealing. Um, so yeah, that's kind of the you know, the many the like the naked city, the million stories of the naked city, you know,
Sure.
uh, hold, holds true as much today as ever.
Will you be doing more events connected to this exhibition, I guess virtually?
Yeah, you know, there's a few different ways in which we we may kind of continue to share this exhibition. I mean, certainly, all things all things willing, the exhibition will be up for quite a while, and because frankly it's dark right now, it may allow us to leave the exhibition up for an extended period of time. So there, fingers crossed, there will be plenty of chances for the visitors to actually come and see the prints themselves. Because there is I mean, I'm a photo person, so I have to say there is. I like seeing actual prints. There's a whole other level of experience by seeing the quality of the prints that these artists are making. You know, there's, you don't have it in your package there, but there are these really beautiful platinum, large format platinum photographs by a woman named Madoka Takagi, who went all over the city making these beautiful view camera pictures. And you know, you see them in reproduction, and they just are not the same. So all that to say is the experience of the pictures in person mean a lot. But we actually do have, and people can do this right now, we actually have an urban archive tour, audio tour. It's Urban Archive is an app, and on there we actually set up a tour in which the photographers themselves speak to the pictures. So you would be able to see the picture and hear the photographers themselves speak about making the pictures. And then, you know, we'll probably write a few blog posts, and who knows, you know, maybe I haven't talked to anybody about this, but maybe we'll figure out a way of doing something like this with some of the photographers
Yeah.
that that are on our walls. So I think there's lots of different ways where we can still you know, engage and share the work with the public.
Okay, great. So I'm going to open it up to the Q&A. So everyone's going to be unmuted. So feel free to chime in if you have a question.
Just do a Q&A.
Anyone?
Off the screen. I have a question.
Sure.
So with I've noticed when I go out into the world recently, it seems like everybody's taking photographs. Because like you had said outside, people are so amazed at the lack of people in New York and how it sort of changed the character of New York. Are you seeing like a massive density of entries for the hashtag? Is it become sort of like you have a lot of work to do sifting through all of these? I could imagine. I think everybody, you know, felt like with Instagram and their phones that they were, you know, photographers to begin with, but now even more so, people are out there sort of synthesizing the world this way. So has this become like a large demand on your time to go through these?
Well, I think, you know, it's kind of steamrolls, you know, as more and more people become aware of the hashtag, and more and more posts are definitely
I need
shared.
I wanted to answer because like I know sometimes it's been weird.
Sean, you're still
Cool.
there?
Yeah, I'm here. So yeah, as the days go by and more people are aware of the hashtag, more gets posted to it. I mean, in a sense, it's good because there's the more you see, the more you have a chance to kind of contemplate the when you're trying to curate it, you know, a collection of pictures. It never hurts to see a lot of pictures because it gives you a choice, and it gives you an ability to kind of pull together different strands sometimes that you didn't even know were possibilities, you know.
Yeah.
So
And
that's
oh, sorry,
go
go
ahead,
ahead. No.
please.
No, I was just going to say, in this time, it seems like almost every photo you come across is tender in some kind of way. So it's like, it just seems like it's to sort of synthesize what goes in, to me would be impossible, because I think they're all good.
Yeah, well, that is always the downside of doing something like this is you have to choose, and you can never choose everything that's worthy, frankly.
Sure.
And that's true of my job in general as a curator for the museum, and as the person who collects for the museum is, you know, I see so much good photography, and for various reasons, it can't all come into the museum. So, I mean, I've been doing this now for, at the museum, I've been doing it for 13 years, and in my career as a curator for almost 20 at this point. So I've kind of built up the skin to accept that it can't all happen, and that my job is to kind of pluck out these things that, and to be honest with you, sometimes terrible in terms of composition, or it might be grainy or what, you know, whatever, but that picture really speaks to something that is happening, or a story that needs to be told. And so you know, it's, in spite of some imperfections or something like that, it's an essential image. Whereas, you know, there may be, you know, dozens of just, you know, tack sharp and really interesting pictures, but, you know, at a certain point you've made a selection of a couple of them, and then it just becomes redundant, and, you know, it's not going to add anything to the story that you're trying to compile. You know, so there's always these decisions and trade-offs that have to be made, and hopefully it all comes together to give a really nice picture of what the common experience is. And as was mentioned at the top, you know, we've done it a couple these public calls a couple times, and I've been pretty happy ultimately with the exhibitions that resulted. We did it for Occupy Wall Street, when we were partnering with the Seaport Museum, and then we did it uptown at the museum for the Sandy show, and we actually also did it for a show on the New York Marathon a couple of years ago.
Remember that one.
So
Yeah.
That's great. And one last thing, this is a plug for, I noticed somebody said they're at MCNY doing virtual tours, but I would like to, before I turn it over to more questions. The Urban Archive app is amazing. And in this time when we are all looking for virtual content and things to do, I highly suggest everybody who is attending this Zoom, check it out. It is, to a historian and guide like myself, it's just like Christmas every time I open the thing up. So thank you for that. And please go check it out. So that's it.
We have a question in the chat about how many photos are in the exhibition, and are all the photos taken by professional photographers, or are some taken from quote unquote random New Yorkers?
Yeah, the telling New York stories, I would say the majority of them are professional, and I put quotes around professional because they, they don't all make their living as photographers, but I think they show their work regularly. It could be, in non-for-profit galleries or things like that. So there's, they're not like working photojournalists per se, but I would say the majority of them are professional photographers, but not completely. And in fact, we took in a collection of snapshots and that are included in the Collecting New York Stories that were they were compiled by a snapshot collector who has literally tens of thousands of snapshots, and he collects them by well, one, they have to be visually compelling, but there are also, he sorts them into different genre or subject matter. And then in fact he's been donating them to a number of institutions. And when I went over to look at his collection, he was showing me basically all the New York stuff he had, and then what I did was I pulled out a collection within that collection of snapshots of New Yorkers on the rooftops. So it's a very New York thing to go up on your roof and take pictures. So I took about 24 snapshots that he had collected from throughout the 20th century of people, maybe with their loved one or their children, on the, or in their bikinis, party, on the rooftop. So and that kind of made a, kind of told its own story, and it kind of told the story of how that has happened throughout the century and how it's a common New York thing. So yeah, it is mostly professional photographers, but not exclusively. And a lot of work by photographers professional pretty regularly here at the museum.
I don't know if everyone heard that. I think maybe the mic got a little bit, the last part of what you said.
I might have covered that. But what I was saying is we look at a lot of work by both professional and amateur photographers at the museum. It's we kind of feel like it's the responsibility, it's the job of the museum to kind of know what people are taking pictures of in the city. And I mean, that said, one of the things we don't really collect at the museum are people's old family albums, just because like at a certain point, we only have so much room, and our archive would just be filled with family. I mean, it's a legitimate way of collecting in a certain sense, and it's important to tell those everyday life stories of people. But in another sense, it's how many people live in the city, and if we took all of the family albums, it would we wouldn't have any room pretty quickly. So it's all about balancing the ways in which we tell these stories.
Okay, great. Before we close up, Meryl Cooper from MCNY says, MCNY has some tours on Urban Archive, and we have some virtual tours on mcny.org. Just see if there's any other last question from the audience before we wrap up.
Yeah, and yeah, the name of the, I saw that on there, the name of the app is Urban Archive, right?
Okay, great. So Sean, thank you so much for joining us. This is really interesting to hear more about what goes behind the scenes in terms of selecting these pictures and what you've been seeing with the COVID Stories NYC. So again, anyone can submit their images to Instagram for COVID Stories NYC using the hashtag. And I'm guessing there may be an exhibition in the down the road for it, so your photo might end up there. And then on our end, tomorrow, Justin Rivers, who was here today, will be hosting a virtual coffee shop about New York City's coffee culture and history. So that's tomorrow at noon. And then tomorrow afternoon, we've partnered with Village Preservation for one of their events about women in Greenwich Village. I think in the Victorian era or something like that. So excited to see you guys there. And for the coffee thing, bring your own brew, is what we're saying, BYOB. And we're gonna ask everyone what coffee that they like and why Justin's virtual brew is appearing in and out of the screen right now.
You kind of put it out.
All right, thanks everyone. See you next time.
Thank you very much.
Bye guys.
Thanks,
See you
Sean.
tomorrow.
Good afternoon.
Bye.
Take care.